I'm Boniface Makongo, currently the Director of Competition and Consumer Protection at the Authority. As you're aware, today we are celebrating once again the World Competition Day. The World Competition Day is celebrated on 5th December of every year. The theme of this year's celebration is competition policy and access to healthcare. First of all, the reason why we celebrate it on 5th of December of every year is because the UN set of principles on competition were adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 5th of December 1980. So that's the reason for the date. And the objective of the day itself is, apart from the fact that it's supposed to inculcate a competition culture, is that it is also supposed to create awareness to the consumers, especially, about the potential benefits they intend or are likely to benefit from having an effective competition regime, and also their role, in the achievement of an effective competition regime. Just to give a background, you're aware that this year we've had the challenge posed by the pandemic, that is COVID-19. So the theme of this year's celebration is quite timely in that regard, because we are having the challenges that come with it. And COVID as a pandemic presents a very unique scenario in the enforcement of competition law and policy. However, strictly speaking, health, even before COVID, is still a challenge in this country. We have statistics that indicate that the products that we are sold, healthcare products in this country, are 30% more expensive than other jurisdictions, both regionally and internationally. You also have, in our context, the total healthcare spend, for the country, 26% of that is from out of pocket, from citizens. They're forced to fork out money to access healthcare. The key things that make the healthcare, both the equipment and the consumer, expensive: one, we have the problem of excessive markups. So the markups in the supply chain are very expensive. Two, there's the issue of the fact that we don't manufacture these drugs. So of course, when you're importing something, it's more expensive. The other thing that is making our medical healthcare products slightly more expensive, of course, also is the information asymmetry. It's possible in Nairobi, for instance, within Nairobi, to get one drug costing maybe 15 or 20% cheaper in one location. But because of information asymmetry, and other factors that you find that consumers are not able to know that, for instance, if I go to this particular place, I may get the same drug at a much cheaper price than somewhere else. So that is also a challenge. The other factor that increases the cost of our drugs is the fact that our regulatory regime in registration of medicine also poses challenges in that regard that result in slightly higher prices. We are part of a task force which is being headed and chaired by the Ministry of Health, and the task force has identified the challenges which I just mentioned. So we are in the process of coming up with recommendations and policy interventions that the ministry can take on board to address all those challenges. We import most of our drugs. And from pharmacy data from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board indicates that we import almost 700 million plus in dollars of drugs annually. Interestingly, all these drugs somehow end up in the public sector. So they're ultimately sold to the government. So the authority is looking at the entire procurement process for medicines with a view of identifying whether there are aspects of that, increased pricing that can be attributed to how we do the procurement, and for instance, the suppliers colluding, in how they supply the drugs to us. So that is an ongoing investigation, at the end of which, if we establish that there are contraventions, we will carry out the remedial action. That's the other angle to it. When the COVID pandemic, was established to have reached our shores, we realized that there was a general spike in all the products which were, whose demand had gone up as a result of COVID and its outbreak. So for instance, you're talking of basic foodstuffs, you're talking about the sanitizers, you're talking of the masks and related equipment. What we did at that time is that we carried out enforcement action across the country. And subsequently, after a month or so, basically we were going in and establishing how much were you selling this product at point X before COVID. Now, after a month or two, what are you selling the product at? And this was basically the entire supply chain, from the ones which are manufactured locally to the ones which are supplied, distributed from imports, and also to the end distributors in terms of the retailers, the pharmacies. And we alerted all those farms, and we put up notices, and we also visited the individual outlets to alert them to the fact that we were watching what they were doing and we were monitoring the activity, and we actually put in a monitoring framework, so that we were alive to how the prices were changing. And as a result of that action, we realized that after a month, there was a significant reduction. There were instances of hoarding, for instance, which we also realized had been cured by our intervention. But additionally, we realized that COVID might be here longer. We are aware there's a vaccine that has been licensed in the UK, for instance. But of course, these are vagaries that we have no control over. So meanwhile, as part of the government COVID strategy, economic recovery strategy, we are in the process of coming up, as part of that strategy, we're coming up with block exemption guidelines. And what these are supposed to do is to enable stakeholders and supply, in the supply chain of the basics, and also in the supply chain of the other equipment is not hindered or impeded in any way. What we are trying to do is to actually streamline the supply chain. Because ideally, if, for instance, two manufacturers of masks were to come together currently based on our law and agree that we'll sell our masks at price X, or that you will sell your mask in Mombasa, I will sell mine in Kisumu, that is a contravention of our act, because that is geographic market allocation. Or if we were to limit output with an intention of creating, an artificial scarcity, that is a contravention of our law. And it will attract remedies, which include, you could be imprisoned to up to 5 years or 10 years fine. Or also, we are empowered to impose a penalty of up to 10% of the turnover if you did that. However, the law does acknowledge the fact that in certain instances, like right now we have an emergency, you may allow people or entities and undertakings to enter into arrangements which would otherwise have been a contravention. But you have to monitor them so that the purpose of that exemption is to allow you to ensure that supply is enabled and is not impeded in any way. So when you increase supply, as you're aware, in basic economics, is that the prices tend to go down. That would be the intention of the block exemption guidelines. Because going forward, you're aware there's a lot of scarcity, there's a lot of challenges even undertakings are having with regard to finances and everything else. So it's a possibility that if COVID was to progress for much longer, you could have a lot of challenges around supply. So that's basically what we'll seek to address. And it will not be, for a long period of time. It will be timed. I just want to invite Kenyans to take advantage of, our mandate. First of all, to join us in celebrating today's day. It's a very, very, very auspicious day where we focus strictly on the consumer, who is a very important stakeholder in all sectors of our economy. So join us in celebrating that day, but also acquaint yourselves with our mandate, how we do enforcement. And in this regard, I would like and invite all Kenyans to look at our website. You see the kind of activities we are currently undertaking, the initiatives that we have going on, the past initiatives and the penalties and remedies that we have imposed on various entities, and so that they also appreciate our mandate. And lastly, people might be aware. It's possible that you could be aware of a contravention that is going on that the authority is not aware of. Invite you to take advantage of the contacts which are put out in our website to get in touch with us. Thank you.